That camera on the street corner, the one you walk past every day without a second thought, it's not just recording anymore. It's analyzing, it's predicting, it's judging. I'm about to show you something that's been deployed in cities across America while we were all distracted by political theater and social media outrage. A system so invasive, so fundamentally transformative to the concept of public space that if I told you about it 5 years ago, you'd have called me paranoid. But this isn't speculation or theory. This is happening right now, on your street, in your city. Let me explain what's really happening here. Since 2018, there's been a massive coordinated effort to transform urban surveillance across America. You've probably heard terms like smart cities and public safety infrastructure thrown around by local politicians. They sound benign, even beneficial. Who wouldn't want a smarter city or better public safety? But what most people don't realize is that in Lance Henling Arsher, the Department of Homeland Security allocated $1.3 billion to the Urban Security Initiative, a program that funded the integration of existing camera networks with a new generation of AI systems. Systems designed not just to watch, but to analyze human behavior at a scale never before possible. Companies like Hikvision, partially owned by the Chinese government, along with American tech giants like Amazon and startups like SenseTime and Clearview AI, have been installing these systems in over 75 major American cities. From New York to Los Angeles, from Chicago to Houston, these cameras now form what industry insiders call the sensory layer of something much bigger. Think about this. In 2010, the average American city had approximately one surveillance camera for every 50 citizens. By 2020, that number had jumped to one camera for every 15 citizens. And it's not just the quantity that's changed, it's what these cameras can do. Let me break down how these systems actually work, because understanding the technology is crucial to grasping the threat. Traditional surveillance cameras just record footage. Someone has to watch that footage either in real time or after the fact to identify anything noteworthy. It's labor-intensive and inefficient. The new systems deployed across American cities incorporate something called affective computing, artificial intelligence designed to read human emotions from facial expressions, body language, and movement patterns. Companies like Affectiva, Entech Lab, and Emotion Research Lab have developed algorithms that categorize your emotional state into categories: happy, sad, angry, nervous, confused, or, and this is where it gets concerning, potentially threatening. These systems analyze micro expressions, tiny muscle movements in your face that last only fractions of a second. They track how you walk, how you hold your body, who you interact with, how long you linger in certain locations. All of this happens automatically without human oversight 24 hours a day. But it gets worse. These emotional recognition systems are now being integrated with predictive policing software. In March 2022, a company called Palantir, founded by Peter Thiel, with initial funding from the CIA's venture capital arm InQtel, signed contracts worth $43 million with police departments in Chicago, Philadelphia, and New Orleans to deploy their Gotham software platform. This system takes emotional data from cameras and combines it with other data sources: your social media profiles, your purchase history, your movement patterns tracked through your phone, even your relationships mapped through facial recognition of who you spend time with in public, all to create what they call threat assessment profiles. Pay attention to this part. In a 2021 investor presentation that was in T, meant for public release, Palantir executives described their system as capable of pre-crime intervention recommendations, a term straight out of science fiction that should terrify anyone who values due process and the presumption of innocence. And the accuracy of these emotion reading systems, a 2019 study by researchers at the University of Cambridge found that even the most sophisticated emotional recognition AI was only about 58% accurate, barely better than random chance. Yet these systems are making judgments about your emotional state, your intentions, and your threat level every time you enter public space. Here's where things get really interesting. These cameras aren't standalone systems. They connect to a vast network of other surveillance tools that have been quietly installed in our cities over the past decade. Those smart streetlights installed in San Diego in 2019, they re-equipped with microphones and environmental sensors. The free public Wi-Fi kiosks in New York, they track every device that connects to them and maintain a database of movement patterns. The traffic management systems in Atlanta, they don't just monitor traffic flow. They track individual vehicles through license plate recognition. It's all part of what former Google CEO Eric Schmidt described in a 2021 tech conference as the sensory layer for AI governance systems. That phrase, AI governance systems, is crucial to understanding where this is all heading. Now let us connect the dots between the technology and the people behind it. In January 2023, the World Economic Forum announced a partnership with major tech companies and 15 city governments to launch what they call AI-enabled community response systems. The program document specifically mentions using emotional pattern recognition to guide community behavior during periods of stress. Let that sink in. Guide community behavior, not protect, not serve. Guide. The funding for these systems reveals even more troubling connections. In 2021, In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital firm, invested $24 million in Banjo, a company specializing in real-time event detection through AI surveillance. The same year, Amazon received a $10 billion contract to provide cloud services to the NSA, giving the agency unprecedented computational power to analyze the data collected by these urban surveillance networks. Think about the implications. The same companies building surveillance infrastructure for intelligence agencies are also building the systems, watching you on your daily commute. And it's not just federal agencies. Local police departments have enthusiastically embraced these technologies, often with little public oversight. In 2020, the New York Police Department signed a $3.5 million contract with Israeli firm BriefCam for video analytics software that can categorize people by age, gender, clothing color, and, you guessed it, emotional state. The Baltimore Police Department went even further. In 2016, they began a secret aerial surveillance program that recorded the movements of every person in the city, storing that data indefinitely. When finally exposed by journalists, the police department simply claimed it didn't need public approval for such programs. This brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of this system, the lack of transparency and oversight. According to a 2022 report by the Government Accountability Office, fewer than 30% of local governments using advanced surveillance technology have any meaningful public oversight mechanisms in place. In fact, many cities deliberately obscure their use of these technologies. They classify contracts as security sensitive. They use vague language like smart city infrastructure instead of surveillance systems. They fragment purchases across multiple departments to avoid triggering thresholds that would require public hearings. But perhaps most concerning is how these systems are increasingly being used to influence behavior, not just monitor it. In 2021, the city of Chicago launched what they called the Safe Zones Initiative. Using their network of over 30,000 connected cameras equipped with emotional recognition software, they began experimenting with what they termed environmental response triggers. When the system detected what it categorized as elevated emotional states in crowds, it would automatically adjust environmental factors, increasing light levels, broadcasting calming sounds or messages, and in some cases, deploying presence indicating measures like police drones or vehicles. This isn't science fiction. This was documented in the city's own technical specifications document, which was only made public through a Freedom of Information Act request by privacy advocates. And this is where it all connects to the larger agenda. In December 2022, at the World Government Summit in Dubai, a panel discussion titled Behavioral Economics and the Future of Urban Management featured representatives from Palantir, Sidewalk Labs, Google's Urban Planning Division, and government officials from Singapore, London, and Toronto. The central theme, how surveillance gathered emotional data could be used to nudge community behaviors toward more sustainable and harmonious outcomes. Now let's look at where this is all heading based on the documented plans and statements from the people building these systems. In October 2022, the National Institute of Standards and Technology published a framework called AI-Enabled Community Spaces, which outlines the integration of emotional recognition technology with what they call responsive infrastructure. The document describes a future where public spaces physically reconfigure based on the emotional states of the people within them. Imagine walking through a city center. You look stressed or angry according to the AI analyzing your face. Suddenly, the digital advertising boards change to show calming imagery. The lighting shifts to soothing blue tones. Subtle audio cues play from hidden speakers, all designed to modify your emotional state without your knowledge or consent. This isn't hypothetical. Pilot programs with elements of this technology are already operating in parts of Singapore, London, and right here in America in cities like Portland and Columbus. But the most concerning aspect is how these systems intersect with access control. In 2023, the Transportation Security Administration began a pilot program called STAR, Streamlined Traveler Authentication and Recognition, at airports in Atlanta, Detroit, and Phoenix. The system uses facial recognition combined with emotional analysis to determine which travelers receive additional screening. According to internal documents leaked to privacy advocates, the system flags travelers displaying emotional incongruity, meaning their emotional state doesn't match what the algorithm expects for their situation. Think about that. A machine is judging whether your emotional response is appropriate and restricting your freedom of movement based on that judgment. The same technology is being adapted for use in shopping malls, sports stadiums, and public transit systems. In each case, artificial intelligence is making decisions about who gets access to public spaces based partly on algorithmic analysis of their emotional state. And here's where we need to talk about the money, because following the money reveals the true purpose of these systems. In 2022, the global market for emotion recognition technology was valued at $23.6 billion. By 2027, it's projected to reach $56 billion. Companies like Nintech Lab, Affectiva, and Kairos are racing to capture market share by promising ever more accurate emotional analysis. But the real value isn't in the technology itself, IDTS, in the data collected. Every time you walk past one of these cameras, your emotional response to your environment is cataloged and stored. That data is incredibly valuable to corporations, political campaigns, and government agencies trying to understand how to influence human behavior. Think about it. Companies already spend billions trying to understand how you feel about their products. Political campaigns invest millions analyzing your emotional responses to messages. Now they can simply purchase access to massive databases that track how real people respond emotionally to real-world stimuli. This explains why investment in these technologies has exploded. In 2021 alone, venture capital firms invested over $8 billion in companies developing emotional recognition technology and its applications. Leading the pack were firms like Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia Capital, and perhaps most tellingly In-Q-Tel, the CIA's investment arm. So what does this mean for you? Every time you walk down a city street, your emotional state is being cataloged, analyzed, and fed into systems designed to predict and ultimately influence your behavior. This isn't speculation. It's documented in government contracts, corporate press releases, and technical specifications. The question isn't whether you being watched. It's how the data they recollecting about your emotions and behaviors will be used to control your access to public spaces, services, and ultimately your freedom of movement. We witnessing the birth of what some researchers have called emotional capitalism, a system where your internal emotional states become external commodities to be bought, sold, and manipulated without your knowledge or consent. And perhaps most concerning is how these systems erode the fundamental concept of public space. Throughout human history, public spaces have been where communities gather, where ideas spread, where political movements form. When those spaces become zones of constant emotional surveillance and manipulation, something essential to democracy is lost. Think about what happens to protest movements in a world where cameras can identify individuals displaying agitation or defiance and mark them for additional scrutiny. Think about what happens to political discourse when the very act of displaying certain emotions in public becomes risky. Pay attention to the cameras next time you read downtown. Look for the small black domes on streetlights, the unobtrusive boxes at intersections, the sleek panels integrated into bus stops and information kiosks. They were not just watching you. They were reading you. They were analyzing your micro expressions, your gait, your interactions. And the people with access to that data are making decisions about what kind of person you are based on algorithms none of us are allowed to examine. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's the documented reality of where surveillance technology has already gone, while most Americans weren't paying attention. So ask yourself, who's watching the watchers? Who's analyzing the analyzers? Who's governing the systems increasingly governing us? Because right now the answer seems to be no one. And that should concern every American who values freedom in public space, privacy of their emotional life, and the right to move through their community without constant algorithmic judgment. The cameras aren't just watching anymore, they were deciding, and we need to start paying attention before it's too late.